إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. وقال تعالى: يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. وقال تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كلام الله، وخير الهدي هدي نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. We begin by praising Allah Azza wa Jal, by thanking Him for who He is and for what He gives, and then we commence by sending praises and salutations upon the greatest human being to ever walk the face of this earth, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. For verily He gave us the best example to follow, and those of us that follow in His footsteps sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is those who will be successful. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the ability and the tawfiq to emulate Him and to use Him as the ultimate role model. Allahumma ameen. Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And so, subhanAllah, we are exactly 2 weeks away from welcoming the blessings of the month of Ramadan. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to reach that month. Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. SubhanAllah, if you look at the Salaf, the pious predecessors of old, 6 months before Ramadan would come in, they would start making the dua that Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. That they would ask Allah 6 months prior to the beginning of Ramadan for Allah to allow them to reach that blessed month, because they truly understood the importance and what it means to get 1 day in Ramadan, to get 1 day. Because wallahi, brothers and sisters, these are the things, 1 day in Ramadan is what we are going to regret most. It's not that we didn't get the Porsche, it's not that we didn't get the bigger house, it's nothing worldly that we are going to wish for, but rather it is these times of immense blessings and barakah that we are going to wish for when we are no longer on this earth. Because then that is the day, the day when we are no longer on this earth, when we realize how much these blessings were that we missed out on. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jal again to allow us to truly recognize and then act upon these days and understand the importance of it. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, and so 6 months before Ramadan they used to say Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. And then 6 months after Ramadan would finish, they would be asking Allah Azza wa Jal to accept from whatever they did during the month of Ramadan. Because nothing is guaranteed for us, brothers and sisters. Whatever we do, we don't know if it is accepted or not. Us being here in Jumu'ah, we hope and pray that Allah accepts from us, and we do our part, but whether it's accepted, that is where we ask and we hope and pray from Allah Azza wa Jal that He accepts. And so that was the dua that they used to make 6 months after Ramadan. And so going into, and I'm sure these next couple of weeks we're going to hear these ayat and these verses again and again. And I want to focus on what Allah Azza wa Jal, He said in this ayah about fasting. He said the purpose of it is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. I want to focus on that last part. And that is to attain piety. That is to attain taqwa. And we hear this a lot, these words like taqwa, and sometimes we can be left wondering, what does it truly mean to attain that taqwa, right? And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, and when He talks about the Day of Judgment, He says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ, right? That on that day, whatever you have amassed in terms of mal, in terms of wealth and banun, children, these things are not going to help you. But what is going to help you is إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Qalb salim, except those who go to Allah with a sound, with a pure heart, right? And all of these things, qalb salim, taqwa, these are all related. right? And so I want to focus, inshallah, today, in today's khutbah, on how we can get closer to attaining that taqwa, how we can get closer to attaining that qalb salim. And I want to start by mentioning a story at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where this happened on 3 different occasions, where the companions, the Prophet ﷺ, they're all sitting together, and the Prophet ﷺ would say, a man is about to walk in from this door, and he is going to be from among the people of Jannah. And so, when the companions, they would hear these things, their ears would perk up, right? They would see, okay, what is this person doing that's so special, so that I can do that and be from among the people of Jannah as well, right? And that is how they were. Anytime they would see something to do good, they were from among the sabiqun, right? They would always want to be at the forefront of doing good, of getting closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla. And so, when the Prophet ﷺ said this, they were all intently, looking on to see who would be coming from the door. And so they saw this man, his beard was dripping wet, and he was just getting ready to pray salah. And so this happened on 3 different occasions, and the companions, they tried to watch and observe this man and see what it is that he was doing that was so unique that earned him the glad tidings of being from Jannah. And so 3 days had passed, and the companions are not, they're not seeing anything unique that the man was doing. And so one of the companions, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he went to this man, and so he went to him and he said, and he made up a story, and where he said, I got into an argument with my dad, and I don't really have a place to stay. Is it okay if I can stay with you? Because what we do in public versus what we do in private might be 2 different things, right? And so maybe the companions, this companion, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he thought maybe this Sahabi that earned the glad tidings, he's doing something at home that we're not seeing that earned him that glad tiding. And so then the man, he was from among the companions, and he said, of course, you can stay with me, no problem. And he gave him a place, a shelter to stay for those 3 nights in which Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As had asked him to stay for. And so again, as a companion, he's trying to observe what this man is doing throughout the night, throughout the day. And what he observed was nothing out of the ordinary. The man, he would get up to pray Salat al-Fajr, he would go to the masjid, he didn't spend a lot of time in Qiyam, he didn't do anything that was special. And so then Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he got disappointed. He thought he could find something that he could go and say, yes, that is it. Right? But he did not get that. And so as he's, the 3rd day has passed and he's going to leave this companion's house, he tells him the true story. He said, I didn't really get into an argument with my dad. I heard the Prophet ﷺ say this about you, and so I wanted to come to your place and see, is there anything special that you are doing that earned you that glad tiding? And so, and he asked, and he said, Abdullah ibn Amr, he asked this companion, he said, is there anything that you can think of that you do that earned you that glad tiding? And then the man said, I can't really think of anything that I do that's special. And so then Abdullah ibn Amr, he got disappointed and he's leaving. And as he's leaving, the man, he says, wait. He says, wait. He says, there's one thing I can think of, and it is that every night before I go to sleep, I rid it from all sorts of ill intentions, evil towards any other human being. In terms of malice, hatred, jealousy, I free my heart of everything before I go to bed. And so the man, he purified his heart, or he attempted to purify his heart of all of these ill feelings and ill things before he went to sleep. And so then Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he said, that is it. That is what we could not see, that is why you had received that glad tiding. And so subhanAllah, this is an example of how we can attain that qalb salim, brothers and sisters, because he earned glad tidings just for removing that. And I know sometimes for some of us it can be hard, right? It can be hard to forgive others. It can be hard, especially if we are the ones who have been wronged, right? If we are the ones who have been wronged by others. And subhanAllah, this happens so often in our communities, right? Where, oh, he said this to me, or she said this to me. And subhanAllah, those around us who are most deserving of our kindness is our own family members, right? And you will find that, arguments, fights between siblings, between spouses, between parents are so common these days. And it is, subhanAllah, sometimes even the most simplest things is what separate, families, is what break up families. And so if we were to remember that this hadith was the reason that the man entered Jannah. Forget about, let's say we were wrong. right? But imagine that if you were to be, quote unquote, the bigger person, as we say in today's world, then that could be the reason for me to attain al-Jannah. Right? Allahu Akbar, right? What could be greater than that? I know if I ask anyone here in the audience today, we might say that we will say, inshallah, that there's nothing greater than that. But sometimes in that moment it can be hard, and that is where I implore, firstly, myself and my brothers and sisters here today to remember this. Right? To remember this hadith of this man who earned Jannah solely from the fact that he rid himself of any ill, any malice, any harm, or anything harmful in terms of intentions towards other individuals. And so, if this wasn't enough, then I want us to look at another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where there are three moments in which the deeds are presented to Allah Azza wa Jal. Firstly, they are presented daily after Fajr and at Asr time, and after Asr time. And on a weekly basis, they are presented on Mondays and Thursdays. And on an annual basis, they are presented in the month of Sha'ban. And so the Prophet ﷺ, it is a sunnah to fast on Mondays and Thursdays because these are the moments in which our deeds are presented to Allah Azza wa Jal. And the Prophet ﷺ, he would fast the most in the month of Sha'ban because that is a time in which the deeds are presented to Allah Azza wa Jal. And I want us to imagine, brothers and sisters, that the angels, they take our deeds up to Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah Azza wa Jal, he asks the angels, he says, what is my servant doing during this time while the deeds are being presented? And the angels mention he is fasting. Right? Allahu Akbar. What better way than for our deeds to be presented than when we are fasting? Right? And so on Mondays, so going back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, on Mondays and Thursdays, Allah Azza wa Jal forgives every servant who does not associate any partners with him, who is taking care of the fara'id, who is doing what he needs to be doing in terms of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal forgives those individuals on Mondays and Thursdays. Okay? And so, except for a group of people, a certain group of people. And I want us to pay attention to this, brothers and sisters, so that inshallah we can avoid from being from among those people. And that is two brothers who are fighting with each other. And so their deeds are put on hold until they reconcile with one another. Allahu Akbar. So imagine we have accumulated all of these things, and inshallah the month of Ramadan is coming up, where the rewards, the blessings are multiplied. Right? Where Allah Azza wa Jalla, he talks about in Surah Al-Qadr, the night of Qadr, Laylatul Qadr khayrun min alfi shahr, right? That it's better than 1,000 months. I mean, sometimes we can't even fathom how long that is, because 1,000 months means a lifetime of worship, 83 years, right? And so imagine all of the blessings that we can reap, and our deeds are being put on hold just because we couldn't be the bigger person, we couldn't reconcile with our brother. We couldn't put down our ego. We couldn't say, I'm sorry. We couldn't go to the other person and say, forgive me, even if you were in the right? And so imagine that our deeds, we seek refuge in Allah from this, because imagine a person passes away and his deeds are being put on hold, right? And so it can prevent us, it can deprive us from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal if we don't reconcile with our brother. And so I think we've kind of been alluding to this in the earlier part of the khutbah, but I want us to highlight and emphasize the importance of fasting of the heart versus fasting of the body. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there are going to be people who they gain nothing out of their fast but thirst and hunger. Right? And we seek refuge in Allah from this, because while they're fasting, they're backbiting, they're doing sins, they're doing things that earn the displeasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, thus thereby taking away from the rewards of that fasting. Right? And so fasting is a proof to ourselves, because if we can stay away from the most basic, right, the most basic of things that our bodies need to survive, then what about the other things that we are doing that are displeasing to Allah Azza wa Jal, that Allah asked us to stay away from? Right? If we can stay away from food and drink, that is proof to ourselves, because without food and drink we can't survive. Right? So if we can stay away from food and drink, we can stay away from those things that are displeasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us that qalb salim, that pure heart. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to be from among those who finish the month of Ramadan attaining that taqwa, because that truly, brothers and sisters, is the purpose of Ramadan. And in the second part of the khutbah, inshallah, we'll go over a few action items that we can keep in mind as this blessed month approaches us. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأهدي صلاة الله ثم سلامه على أسعد خلق الله أجمعين، نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين، وارض اللهم عن الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وعن سائر أصحابه أجمعين، أما بعد. So we've kind of been going over some of the things that we can do to attain this taqwa, to attain that qalb salim, because that is how our actions will be accepted. And subhanAllah, I want us to make a parallel. Ramadan is about 2 weeks away from us, right? Now I want us to imagine the opportunity of a lifetime, whether it's the opportunity to attain that dream job that we've been dreaming of, or to attain that dream house that we've been dreaming of, or to attain that dream spouse that we've all been hoping for, or to attain whatever it is, or maybe even something as important as a court date, in which during that day it will be determined whether you are going to spend your life in prison or you are going to be a free man. Right? So these are all immense and huge life things that we will plan for well in advance of that coming in. Right? So imagine this month of Ramadan, this blessed month of Ramadan, in which the Salaf used to ask for 6 months before that they ask Allah to reach that month. Right? And so don't you think that this month warrants a little bit of planning? Don't you think that this month warrants that we prepare for it and we do everything that we can so that when the month comes in, the ball has already been rolling, the engine's already been warm? Right? And so let's look at some of the things that we can go over. And the first thing was what we talked about in the first part of the khutbah, which is forgive others not for their sake. Right? You might have been wronged by others. Forgive them for the sake of Allah, so you can attain that pure heart before the month of Ramadan comes in. Forgive others for the sake of Allah. And sometimes, again, they might not be deserving of your forgiveness, but you still do it so that you can at least be from among those who, or you can be like the man who was promised Jannah because he forgave others and he didn't have anything in terms of ill intentions. And subhanAllah, this is one of the hardest things that we can do, because when we try to forgive someone, shaitan is going to come to us in that moment, because he doesn't want the believers to be one another, to be strong together, because when we're divided, that is when the ummah is weak. Right? The ummah becomes weak when we become divided. And so shaitan is going to try to convince you to not forgive that person. But that is when you fight the urge and you say, you remember these ahadith, you remember that إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. And you remember that and you forgive that person for the sake of Allah, so you can attain that reward from Allah Azza wa Jalla. And number 2, the second thing that we can do is to make a habit of seeking istighfar constantly and remembering Allah in general. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to do istighfar constantly. And on some narrations, he used to seek it over 70 times, over 100 times. Right? So if the Prophet ﷺ himself was seeking istighfar, then what about us? And the Prophet ﷺ was a sinless person, sinless human being. Right? So be in the habit of the constant state of dhikr, because that is the easiest way to obtain rewards. Because we can be doing it whenever. We can be doing it on our way back home. We can be doing it whenever we're, the only time we can't make dhikr is when we're inside the bathroom. Right? So it is a chance, it is an opportunity to consistently be in the remembrance of Allah and to gain rewards consistently. And remember in the month of Ramadan that whatever action we do, it is multiplied. And so you will see all of these adhkar on the Day of Judgment, and you will think, where did all of these deeds come from? And it is because the deeds were multiplied. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to allow us to be from among the dhakireen, right? The people who remember Allah constantly. And then, as we prepare for Ramadan, Ramadan is the month of fasting, right? And we learned that the Prophet ﷺ, he would fast the most in the month of Sha'ban. And so try to increase in voluntary fasting. Try to start with the sunnah, whether it's the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th of the month. And then if we do that and we want to do more, then do Mondays and Thursdays, right? And then if we want to increase further, then fasting then we do as much as we can. right? And so that way, again, because you'll find that for those of us that don't fast until the first day of Ramadan hits, the first day of Ramadan is very difficult for many people, and the second day and the third day, because the body is not used to it. So again, if the engine is already running when Ramadan comes in, then you can focus your time and you can do more and you can attain more out of that month, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And then number 4, increase in sadaqah, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he was the most generous during the month of Ramadan, right? And I know that, during Taraweeh timings, people will start saying, oh, another fundraiser, right? But that is because every single night of Ramadan is an opportunity for us to attain reward, right? And so we should look at it as a means of obtaining that reward, and that the organizations that come in, those are all ways for us to gain the pleasure and the rewards from Allah Azza wa Jal. And so if we get into the habit of giving now, then when the month of Ramadan comes in, it'll be much easier for us, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And lastly, make dua for a clean heart, right? Because Allah is pure and will only accept things that are pure, right? And so Allah Azza wa Jal is the one that controls the hearts. And so why is it that we find it difficult to make dua to Allah? Right? So make dua to Allah, make whatever it is that you are wanting and you are hoping for, start to make dua now, so that inshallah when the month of Ramadan comes, you have already been in the habit of making dua, and you can just increase in whatever it is that you've already been doing. Right? And Allah Azza wa Jal, anything is possible for Allah. So ask Allah for whatever it is that your heart is wishing and hoping for. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to obtain the benefit of Ramadan. So just to summarize, inshallah, the first point that we said was forgive others for the sake of Allah. The second point that we said was try to make it a habit of seeking istighfar constantly and being in the constant remembrance of Allah Azza wa Jal. Number 3, we said to try to increase in voluntary fasting. Ramadan is the month of fasting. And so try to increase so that when the month of Ramadan comes in, it's easier for us to get into that habit of fasting daily for 30 days. And then number 4, increase in sadaqah, increase in charity, because again, charity will only increase your wealth. مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِنْ صَدَقَةٍ. And lastly, to make dua to Allah for a clean heart, for that qalb salim, because Allah Azza wa Jal is the one, Allah Azza wa Jal will only accept a qalb salim. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, Allahumma ighfir lil mu'minina wal mu'minat, wal muslimina wal muslimat, al ahya'i minhum wal amwat, innaka ya mawlana sami'un qareebun mujib ad-da'awat, ibadallah, inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna 'ala an-nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu 'alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli 'ala Muhammad wa 'ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita 'ala Ibrahim wa 'ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik 'ala Muhammad wa 'ala ali Muhammad kama barakta 'ala Ibrahim wa 'ala ali Ibrahim fil 'alamin innaka Hamidum Majid. Ibadallah rahimakumullah, ittaqullah, inna Allah ta'ala ya'muru bil 'adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Fadhkurullaha al-'azim yadhkurkum washkuruhu 'ala ni'amihi yazidkum wa la dhikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un.